Hi! Welcome to Eye of the Beholder painting tutorials. Today I'm going to be painting a model of Aloy from the Horizon Zero Dawn games that I found on Etsy as a Christmas gift to my partner. The link for buying it will be in the description as always. So when I received the model, there were a couple of things on it that I tried to clean off, and in doing so I may have snapped the bow into 3 pieces. However, I did find a replacement bowstring and I was able to couple together enough glue to make it at least convincing. I just thought that I should mention that I did in fact break it. I primed it in my usual fashion of a base of black and then a couple of sprays of white. So because I'm a complete weirdo, I thought I should start with the face and the skin. I made a base tone of Bugman's Glow and Cadian Flesh Tone like I always do, and then I added in small amounts of Cadian Flesh Tone to this to get my brighter highlights before using a small amount of Flayed One Flesh for my brightest highlights. I ended up using 4 colors altogether that I went back and forth with and wet blended and such. I used these tones on the hands of her bow, which I didn't attach because it would be way too hard to paint her body while it's there, on her exposed arms, and on her face. I thinned the paints a little here to help it flow better, and to blend better, and to follow the zenithal priming that I did. There isn't a lot to explain about my process of highlights here, since it followed generic highlight templates, but I also did spend like 40 minutes on this because I wanted it to look really good. I even had a photo of Aloy's face really close up, like right next to me for reference. Once I relatively had my basic tones down, I added a small amount of Screamer Pink into my brightest tone and then gently placed that along her cheeks, since she seems to generally have like a very flushed skin tone. When it came to the face, I ended up playing around and changing a lot as I went along. I darkened the shadows randomly, I added more highlights, I took away some highlights, I changed how much of her face was red. It was a shit show, honestly. I'm telling you this partly to explain why her face changes tones randomly in the video, and also just to say that it's perfectly okay if you don't know exactly what you want the tones to be when you're putting them on the model. Shift things around, change what you like. No brushstroke is permanent in the miniature painting world. I'm not sure at what point in the skin tone process I did this, but I added some Screamer Pink into the original base tone for the skin and used that to paint her lips before quickly highlighting with the additions of more skin tones to that. For my next ridiculous undertaking, I noticed that Aloy has some trademark blemishes and imperfections on her skin, and I was like, oh yeah, I could do that. I tried different variations of this before finally settling on using a thinned dark mix of Rhinoxide and Bugman's Glow and placing those in the appropriate places on her face with like teeny tiny brushes and a lot of anxiety. Once I was done with all of that for the moment, I made a quick mix of Rhinoxide and Doombull Brown and sketched her eyebrows in. Then I darkened some Rhinoxide with some black and gently lined the areas around her eyes, as well as the eyes themselves. Once dry, I made a bright mix of Flayed One Flesh and white to base her eyes. Then I placed pure white right in the centers. Taking a glance at her in-game eye color, I made a mix of moot green and Uriel yellow for the irises. and naturally pure black for the pupils. Also, yes, I am aware that she currently has crazy eyes, but with some trimming back of the white using the dark brown lining color, I fixed that soon enough. Just ignore it for now. Now with her skin tone meticulously done and her crazy eyes not yet fixed, I moved on to her hair. As some of you may know, hair is not my strong suit, but thankfully there are a lot of photos of Aloy's hair in-game. I sadly didn't notice the blonde tips of her hair in time, but I got the auburn down pretty good. To start off, I mixed the same dark Rhinox hide and Doombull brown color for her eyebrows as the base tone. Then I quickly moved to pure Doombull brown in small sketchy segments on the raised bounds of her hair. For bright flashes of highlight, I used varying amounts of Cadian flesh tone to mess with the brightness in different areas. Hair should have a high contrast, remember, so the brightest highlights should be pretty bright and the midtones should honestly not be as visible as you would expect them to be. My highlights have now been placed, but the hair is not actually done yet. The final step will be later in the video when Past Me finally realizes how not orange the hair looks. But until then, I moved on to the body. The first part I painted was all of the brown leather areas. This included the sides of the torso, the leather bags on her belt, the lower part of her sleeves, her side quiver, and her upper pants. I based all of them in pure Rhinox hide. Once it came time to highlight, I mixed a large amount of Baneblade Brown in as a midtone to cause quick contrasts. This built up in 4 increments, each one obviously getting brighter when the highlights got smaller. I did it with almost pure Baneblade Brown and made use of the edge highlighting for maximum leathery effect. This was also a very sketchy process to show use in the leather. My next step was the beige leather sections that made up a large portion of her body. I heavily refer to the reference photo for where to put these. For a base, I mixed Talaran sand in with some Rakarth flesh and carefully applied it to the upper torso, the middle part of the lower torso, shoulders, gauntlets, boots, and the skirt pieces. I also noticed while doing this that the lower part of the gauntlets were supposed to be brown, so I just did that real quick. I also adjusted the eyes at this stage to make them less crazy. I did a quick second coat to make sure it took well enough, and then slowly added Rakarth flesh in for the highlights and to also draw the color away from the yellowish of the Talaran sand. I ended the step with pure Rakarth flesh, and with that I carefully outlined the small designs on the skirt pieces to make them attempt to stand out. I also later strengthened the shadows under them to show them more. Some of Aloy's leather straps had rims of grey fur on the lining, and I painted these, along with the fur on her shoulders and other random places, with a base of Skavenblight Dinge and Baneblade Brown. I highlighted this with literally just the addition of white, so make it brighter quickly since that made it look more natural with the furry texture. Also because it's easier to highlight things when there's only two colors you're putting on. It is now hair fixing time. I grabbed some of the bloodletter orange glaze and I thinned it down before covering just all of the hair in it. This made sure that it retained all of the highlights I put in, but it just tinged the entire thing orange, and now it is perfect. Anyway, once I did that, I took a Rhinox Hide Scrag Brown mix and painted the beaded necklaces, the bands on the quiver, and the strips of brown in the middle part of the lower torso. These were highlighted using almost pure Scrag Brown and then bright Cadian flesh tone mixtures. Aloy has a little rope on her back, and all I did for that was base it with Talaran sand mixed with some black and then highlighted with Talaran sand, followed by the smallest bit of Cadian flesh tone. I used pure black on the bottom and the top of the quiver, as well as the arrows inside of it. The things on her kneecaps are also like a weird bony color, despite the fact that they look like metal plates, but I went with the picture. Based them in Flayed One flesh and highlighted with white. To make life slightly easier on myself and also to draw some attention to it, I painted the parts actually made out of metal in a metallic Iron Warriors. This included the gauntlet tops and the lining of the knee pads. Highlighting metallic paints is very difficult to get right, so I don't do it a ton. All I did was add some white to it and be very vague. If you add too much non-metallic paint to a metallic paint, it ends up losing its shine and causes the highlights to seem unbalanced, unrealistic, and weirdly, reversed. It's a fine line I'm walking here, in other words. Finally, moving on to more of the colorful parts of her outfit, I saw these few dark green nets around her torso and legs. I based them in Vulcan green, darkened with a little black, and then highlighted them with Vulcan green and Straken green mix. This whole process here was extremely stressful and anxiety-inducing, but thankfully my hands were not too shaky. Once I had those done, I actually noticed a small scrap of orange fabric on her leg. I based it in Doombull Brown mixed with Scrag Brown, and then I highlighted with pure Scrag Brown, and then the additions of Troll Slayer Orange. I also used these same tones for the orange feathers on the necklace, and also the weird thing that I couldn't properly identify on her back. Now for the real colorful parts. The skirt and neck thing both have very rich blue tones, which I based in pure Cantor blue and then highlighted by adding Techless blue and then pure Techless blue. Then I edge highlighted using Lotharen blue. I also painted a few random beads and a feather on the necklace with these. Before moving on to the next big color, I just took some random light gray paints as well as Doombull brown and colored in a couple of random beads on a necklace for variety, adding 1 or 2 highlight tones each. I felt like painting the arrow feathers next, despite them being very small. My personal preference for painting minis is that I like to leave the most striking color or design for last so that I can really see it come together, so I wanted to paint every little thing I did before the final bright red. The feathers were simply Averland Sunset, vaguely edge highlighted with the addition of some white, and once that dried, each feather had a couple of horizontal black stripes on them. Then I simply finished up any remaining things I'd forgotten with colors already used, and then I did the red. I made my usual go-to red gradient by basing it in corn red, then making an in-between of it and Mephiston red, going to pure Mephiston, and then putting in small amounts of Trollsolaire orange to make my brightest color. And with that, I completed what I believe to be one of my best minis. Except for the bow. The bow was honestly a bit of a hassle to paint since I couldn't have anything hold it without breaking it, so I was just left to kind of hold it in my hands, which you should always try to not do. Also, I know it looks like literal garbage right now due to my glue job, but this was literally the best I could get it without the risk of it shattering more. Looking at the reference photo, I put down a base of pure Rhinox hide wherever I could see a kind of either leather or wood, I'm not sure which. This was then dry brush highlighted with Baneblade brown. The other parts of the bow were a kind of whitish metal thing, which I can only assume to be like pieces of the robots from the game. I made a gradient from Flayed One Flesh and Grey Seer to pure Grey Seer before finally adding in some white. I corrected these around a little bit before making another Rhinoxide to Scrag Brown kind of gradient for the lighter leather portions of the bow. The bow string I made with my Tolaran Sand and Black mixture, and I didn't really bother highlighting it. The arrow nocked in the bow is painted the same way as the ones in the quiver. For consistency, you know. I also gave it a small red line at the base of the shaft though, because why not? Then I painted the feathers on it with the same orange and blues used on Aloy. The bow was a bit underwhelming, if I'm honest, but Aloy could never be seen without it. And once I glued her all together, I'm incredibly proud of the result. Also, you'll see that I have a base for her here. It's a 3D printed model of a downed machine token from the Horizon Zero Dawn board game that I found online. I'll put a link to it in the description as well if you're thinking of printing it off, but it's only a 3D file. And that's my Aloy tutorial! I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'm incredibly proud of this paint job. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know either through email, commenting on this video, or whatever you're most comfortable with. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!